All of you are probably familiar with LSO. So I'm not going to educate you on what LSO really and how it is defined at the outset. But what I would like to talk about a little more before we get into the meat of the presentation is about insight research. So insight research, as Dan mentioned, was founded in the year 1990, and it has its roots in this very country. Before moving further, I would like to thank the good people at the MEF for sharing their thoughts and their opinions. And I went to them with whatever findings we had as a part of our market research assignment. And they were very kind enough to either agree or disagree or debate our findings. And this presentation would not have happened without them. I'd also like to thank the other respondents from carriers and vendors who volunteered to share their opinions, their initiatives, and their fears and hopes about what LSO entails. So Insight Research was founded in 1990 in Bunton, New Jersey. And in 2016, we shifted operations to Bangalore. Uh, what has remained consistent is our unwavering focus on telecommunications. So, last 3 years, we have been focusing on SDN and NFV technologies. And we brought out our first report in February last year. That was a kind of a master list for SDN and NFV market. We profiled close to 100 companies. And moving forward, we have plans of covering a lot of areas that are allied with SDN and NFV and can have a direct bearing on the telecommunications market, which they would have otherwise found to be a little more roundabout and difficult to access. So LSO also is one such area. It has its paths cross with SDN and NFV at multiple levels, and our report on this particular subject is due for publication next month. So this is the standard, way in which a presentation is usually structured, but this is not a standard presentation. I'm not going to chronicle what LSO is, so because I'm sure all of you are aware of what LSO is, I'm going to basically critique it. So why am I going to critique it, and what we find interesting about LSO? LSO is a term that our team encountered for the first time in 2015, around 2015, 2016. And what struck us as a team and as me as an individual is its sheer audacity and ambition. And as it usually happens with initiatives that are so all-encompassing in its scope, it has led to a lot of varied interpretation of its scope. And to their credit, the good people at the MF have taken numerous course corrections to make it more relevant and bring it to the market as quickly as they can. As market researchers, we find forecasting and quantifying the market size for such technologies and such initiatives quite challenging, and that is one reason why we have dived headlong into forecasting the market size for LSO. So let me begin on a lighter note. If you Google LSO, this is what you find. You find London Symphony Orchestra, and I don't think this is this is just coincidence. I think the guys at MEF have been besotted by music. That is apparent in the names of the APIs that they have chosen. You have sonata, you have legato, you have presto, you have cantata, you have interlude, adagio, allegro. I think all of them have some musical connotation or the other. Yeah, and I reckon the people at MEF, they believe, and rightly so, that LSO should create a harmony of inter-operator alliance. But there is a caveat here. you know if the harmony can happen only if everybody is at the same page, on the same page. If there is a discord, if there is a deviation in understanding and in expectations, then this harmony can lead to discordant, this so called harmony can lead to discordant notes and can descend into a cacophony. So, the purpose of this presentation is to highlight some of the contradictions and inconsistencies of LSO and the course correction measures that MEF has taken over the years, and the inherent strengths that we believe will take LSO forward, notwithstanding the obstructions that it has faced in the past. So, look at the definition and introduction of LSO. You have some keywords like open, interoperable, layer 2, layer 3. Now, when I see all these phrases in a single sentence, I usually get a little doubtful. Because I'll just give you a small example. Like, we completed a report last month on the VRAN market. And as many of you will be aware, there are three influential industry groups that have three separate definitions of how the protocol stack should be dissected. And this is only for a small segment in, in an operator's function. So imagine you are trying to bring together multiple operators who have networks running with multiple burdens of legacy, multiple levels of legacy, and trying to synchronize them and make them talk to each other and roll out services that will have the ubiquity of the internet. These are MEF's words, and the performance and security of carrier Ethernet 2.0. That is not a simple objective, and probably this overarching objective has led to the definition and the scope of LSO to be so ambitious and so overarching. So in our opinion, this is what it is. It's an alert for too much of complexity. So moving forward, this is a reference architecture which I'm sure all of you would be familiar with. And when we spoke to respondents, including operators and vendors, what we found is most of them, viewed LSO as an orchestrator which tries to encompass multiple business functions across, multiple operators and their customers. But we look at LSO differently. We look at LSO essentially as a matrix of north-south interfaces and east-west interfaces. And the business applications or the service orchestration functionality and such similar blocks that happen to be there are just ways of punctuating that matrix. And I'll justify this as we move along. Although the early days of LSO implementation seem to belie this particular definition that we have arrived upon, you will see that as we progress, this particular interpretation of LSO stays truer. So why LSO? Why have the good folks at MEF decided to take something which is so all-encompassing, something so vast? So, yeah, here you go. Not being ready and being ready can make hell of a lot of difference about what is a challenge and what is an opportunity. So what are we talking about when we talk about being ready or not being ready? So look at this marvelous sketch. Yeah. The ship, as you can see, is the Titanic. Okay. And the more perceptive upon amongst you, you would have identified this as the iceberg. Okay. So this is not any ordinary Titanic. This Titanic is telco operations. What are they characterized by? All the burden of legacy and ad hoc expansion practices. And this Titanic is about to burst upon the iceberg of challenges such as agile OTT services and numerous opportunities, which is a shame. I mean, I can understand that you are going to burst upon a challenge and meet your destruction, but why should opportunities also be a problem? They are a problem because you're not ready to face them. Only if you're ready to face them can you leverage and maximize what they entail. Otherwise, they become a burden and you start implementing them only because someone else is implementing them and not because it makes business sense for you. So, this particular problematic profile of telco architecture is unlikely to, pardon my pun, cut much ice. It, thanks. So, how does LSO intend readying the telcos? And what are the implications of its structure, the way it has been visualized for telcos? So, this is something that we got from MEF 55 service operation specifications. So, the LSO essentially is a hierarchical breakdown of numerous capabilities which are further broken down into sub operations, which are further broken down into sub operations. And such a hierarchy is available for practically each one of the items listed to the left. And you can imagine, I mean, it's all good to have such a detailed definition. And to the credit, I can say that this particular document has usage of imperative and obligatory words like shall or should or must or not. But you know the tendency of the market is to include as many things as possible, or at least claim to include as many things as possible, and it doesn't help that you have so many things that you're trying to bundle in a single offering. So in our opinion, this is a complexity overload. Once again, look at the functional management entities. So what do you have from here? What do you have here? You have business application at the top, which is, and you also have customer application at the bottom. So what is left actually for a telco to do that LSO does not cover? So, I mean, this is probably something too much to chew. And what does that lead to? It leads to a lot of challenges. And what are those challenges arise because LSO is not in its initial days, at least, I mean, when we started working on that, because there is a lack of categoricalness in its scope and its definition. So I'll again illustrate this to you with a metaphor. So this is an elephant, as you can all find out. And you would have heard the story of the blind man and the elephant. So this elephant, you can say, is an LSO. And these are the blocks that constitute the LSO. But hey, are they impinging upon something that is already there? Are we reinventing the wheel over here? Look at it again. So, this is something very real. I mean, we have products that have very little variation in one version, another version, and third version. And one version is marketed as orchestrator at one level, another level is marketed as orchestrator at another level, and third version is marketed as the all-encompassing orchestrator. So this is the reason. The reason for this is that LSO promises a lot, and all these products go with the tag as LSO ready or LSO supporting or LSO this and LSO that, but not LSO certified, as Dan said, told me in the morning. So let us demystify LSO, what LSO is all about. So here you have MANO at the core, which orchestrates network functions. The SDN controller orchestrates network topologies, which are made up multiple network functions. What LSO orchestrates, it's network services that include network topologies across multiple network operators and tries to present it as a single application to the end user. So LSO by its definition is very simple really, but then it has become complicated due to the above mentioned earlier mentioned factors. So what is LSO all about? It is essentially about APIs. And because of the learning that, because of such an all encompassing scope, probably it has taken a toll at the development timelines of the APIs. So most of you will be aware of how the APIs are how the APIs stand as of now. And today we have Sonata and Presto. These are the two APIs where some concrete work has been done. So is the path ahead completely gloomy, or is there hope for LSO? No. What works in favor of LSO is the solid backing of service providers, and I believe these are the ones that have publicly endorsed LSO, and I gather that there are many more that are working behind the scenes. So after all, the strength of any initiative depends on how many service providers and back it with what intensity. And I gather that the LSO is on a very strong footing on that front. So these service providers, along with their vendor partners, have come up with some very impressive proof of concepts. And I believe in the last MEF you had close to 20 POCs. So that is something that is something that gives hope. So how does the market size for LSO look like? And this is one major area of confusion. So one of the reasons that why Insight Research decided to venture into LSO market forecasting was because of its humongous size that was of its total addressable market, and that was $250 billion. But Dan has shared the breakdown of those $250 billion. So what I gather is that it includes the LSO solutions as well as services and applications that are facilitated by LSO. So that majorly includes the SD-WAN market, which draws a lot of its muscle through LSO implementations. We have independently, we have found the market size, we have a projected market size for LSO solutions alone for the year 2020 to 2025, and I am happy to share our forecast for the year 2020. I have kept the slide to scale. I have not done the second graph to scale for a very specific reason, as to highlight that humongous gap that between $250 billion and $2 billion, to just have a greater sense of reality. So $2 billion is not a small market by any stretch of imagination, but that is what we think it is. And it is made of two primary components, the BUS and SOF solutions, which I think are the majority right now. And sorry, the SOF. Okay.
Yes, the business functions and the service orchestration function.
Okay. And the other part is the API and gateway solutions. So the BUS and SOF solutions in our findings are close to 82%, and the other part is about 18%. Now this BUS and SOF solution is the low-hanging fruit of sorts, because if I'm having a Mano product, or if I'm having an SDN controller, it takes lesser incremental development work for me to build an LSO orchestrator that emulates the BUS and SOF functionalities. LSO orchestrator, I'm sorry. Whereas we believe the real game changers are the API and gateway solutions, which essentially facilitate diverse telcos to talk to each other and also facilitate north-south communication amongst the OSS and the network equipment infrastructure. So these are the solutions that will gather steam as MF comes up with more and more APIs and more and more of them hit the market and display a greater level of readiness. So here are some examples of the vendors that are offering BOS and SOF solutions. So you can see, sorry, I'm so sorry. Yeah. So here you can see BUS and SOF are these blocks, and in Netcracker you have the service orchestration and network orchestration that roughly emulate these functions. Similarly, in Blue Planet, where is it gone? Yeah. So this is the Blue Planet, and here you have Cisco. These blocks more or less emulate the BOS and SOF functions. Moving forward, we have Cloudify and Amdocs and Anuta. Anuta is one unique case. Actually, we spoke to MEF. They were hesitant to associate with Anuta, but Anuta's product also matches pretty much what BOS and SOF blocks entail, in our opinion. These are two examples of vendors offering gateway solutions, Emeritus and ECI Tele. We believe that this is the segment that is likely to grow much faster than the BOS and SOF, and we'll be able to share the metrics with you, at least the highlights of you next month. We'll be breaking down the market, and not just on this, we'll also be breaking down by regions and several other operator profile parameters. So in a sense, what have we found about LSO ever since we started working on it? What we find is that on the positive side, there is an ever growing clarity about what LSO entails. And LSO designers and the stakeholders are getting increasingly realistic about what deliverables should take priority over what. I mean, in the hindsight, they could have done some things better, but then hindsight is always 2020. So it's easy for me as an analyst to say this should have been done before that, but we should credit MEF for first of all identifying this particular problem, this particular gaping hole, and accepting this challenge and moving ahead with a plan of action to tackle this challenge. I gather that MEF decided to get into this because they have the background of defining interfaces in an object-oriented fashion. So one of the phrases that I heard from one of my interviews is that LSO is software 101. So this is something that is very interesting because we increasingly see the telco members, so who are set in more or less in the traditional ways of operations, so enthusiastically embracing something that is going to be so radically different from their usual set ways of operation. So on the market front, we think that the BUS SOF will have the lion's share in the near future, but it will make way for API gateway market API gateway solutions as time progresses. So with that, I come to the end of my presentation, and thank you so much for hearing me out patiently, and I'm ready to take questions.
We're there. REA? REA first.
I'm unfamiliar with the concept of an API gateway. Could you please illuminate?
Oh, sure. I'll. Can I have the presentation on, please? The last 3 or 4 slides. So I'd like to draw your attention to the product that Emeritus offers. Would it be? Is it visible here if I highlight it over here? So what they essentially say is that, you know, if you have your business,
In the microphone.
yeah. So what the gateway essentially does is that if you have provision for an API at your business function level, well and good. If you don't have, then we are providing you with a block which will make your business function talk to another business function, either as an, if you're an operator with another operator, or if you're a customer, then with your operator provider using our gateway. So API is supposed to be a gateway. I mean, I understand where you're coming from. API is supposed to be a gateway, but not all business functions were defined, thinking that there is something going to be a Sonata or a Presto coming in the future. So what do we do with the existing business blocks that we already have? So this is a elegant solution for achieving that objective.
My question is, how do you conduct your market research, and whom do you talk to? Do you talk to telcos, cloud providers, enterprise customers? Who's going to deploy this stuff?
So the market research is conducted at two levels, primary research and secondary research. For a subject like this, primary research is very important. So we talk extensively to a lot of people. These include primarily operators, because they are, in our opinion, the end users, and they are the ones that feel the pinch of whatever happens. So operators are our number one respondent group. The second group that we talk to extensively is the vendors who have solutions in this space. For this particular assignment, we have spoken extensively to the MEF also. So because they are the ones that are driving this initiative. And as I mentioned earlier, we went back to them on multiple occasions. And they were and we went back to them with our doubts and whatever preliminary conclusions we had, and and we got them addressed. By addressed, I mean I'm not all 100% convinced by what they said, but at least we know that they have a point of view, and I have done my best to present their point of view also, with whatever opinions we had on this particular issue.
And no cloud companies, no cloud
Yeah,
giants?
cloud companies count amongst the vendors. So vendors are, this could include the equipment vendors, and this could include the software vendors. Now, increasingly with SDN, NFV, you see the profile of vendors is changing. So earlier you had more or less, you could count the number of influential vendors on the fingers of your two hands. But with SDN and NFV, this number has drastically expanded. So cloud companies also constitute the vendor community.
Okay, I'll talk to you offline for more.
Sure.
So just say a little more when you talk to MEF. Was it MEF employees or the MEF members who volunteer and do the work?
Employees.
Did that include Jack?
What is Jack exactly? He's a
Boguszewski?
Yeah, I spoke to Jack also.
Yeah, so he's with CenturyLink.
Yes.
So he's a member contributing company.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But Jack was not the only one that we spoke to.
I know.
Yeah.
So your presentation portrayed complexity, I think, a lot as one of the big challenges here. And one of the things is I think there's a lot of choices in this space, and yet another one. So I have a question about this. Maybe you are still learning about this, or what you know, that recently was announced Lean NFV. Is that something entirely different? Is it potentially something that could be helpful here? Is it not very well? What are your thoughts on the new? I know it was just announced.
No, I'm not sure. I'm not able to comment on this right now.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Maybe Dan knows, or
Yeah, and then I'll give it to Shaheen. Yeah, so Lean NFV is a new term from a new company in Berkeley, and lean NFV. To us, it's an implementation of some part of this reference framework. We don't care how any of these things are implemented. Shaheen?
No, it's just the same. So, as you know, there are not many NFV deployments really out there. So there is a new attempt or rebranding, if you call it, but it's actually the bulk of functionality is not as heavy as it used to be. So it's truly...
So it's some kind of subset.
Right, so and hopefully really deployable this time. So it's not tied to OpenStack as usual.
Deployable NFV, okay. Right.
Other questions? Yes.
So I looked at your slides, and if you go back even two more with your pie chart broken up, I'm still unclear where the revenue is coming based on your projections. Are you saying that the gateway and APIs, that the vendors who are, right, so the vendors, the next one, I'm sorry, the other way. But you're talking, I mean, that's a lot of money, but then one more.
No, this is the only slide that talks about the revenue. Next one is...
But, so the vendor approaches, what is...
Yeah,
where is the money going to come from? I understand the approach,
okay.
but how does that move down to revenue or spend?
So let me talk a little more on that. So what we are quantifying here is only the solutions market. So if you have a product, pure software product, I would just say it's as simple as that. So LSO is nothing but software. It's like any other software package. And this is the market size for LSO software. So what are the components of this software package? One component is the BUS and SOF blocks, which are basically orchestration blocks. These are pure software constructs. They can be implemented like any other software package. The other component is the API gateway package, which is again a software construct. So these are products that many of the mainstream network equipment vendors already have, and I have given examples of that. You also have companies from the OSS BSS space that have products in that, like Amdocs. And so these the 82% pie is dominated by these more or less traditional companies like your network equipment vendors or OSS BSS giants, and with a few exceptions like Cloudify. Whereas the 18% block, we believe, will be more, I should say, easier to crack for newer companies. And it is evident because you see the profile of companies. I'm not saying all of them are new to the market, but they were not as dominating as the mainstream vendors. So that will be a more level playing field is what I reckon. So it's a software market. The software market has two components. One is BUS and SOF, and second is the API gateway. Does that answer your question?
Pretty much. But so based on Dan's clarification, I'm sorry, if you go forward two more.
Sure.
Back to where Meth's on there, the other way.
I'm not sure what.
At the end.
At the end, okay.
At the end. Because if you have meth in there, that's really the partners. Your partners, you're not going to be selling.
We don't sell any.
Right. That's where my confusion, part of my confusion was.
MEF is a facilitator, basically, and.
You do have a market awareness.
Alan just asked if we have a market awareness. We measure our success by the size of the markets that we foster. So, and we'll tell you how many members we have, but this is not, we don't keep score with members and projects and lines of code. It's what's the size of right now, the carrier Ethernet market. It's now $90 billion a year, which is like $55 billion a year in services, and then $35 billion in technology solutions sold to that market. He's only counting the technology solutions for these components that he's identified.
Right.
Other questions? Thank you, Kaustubha.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you everyone for your time.